want to talk to you about what's happening in the world today. But I want to take this question very literal. I want us to talk about what is happening in the world. And by the world, I mean the world system. We know that Scripture talks to us about three enemies. We have the devil, obviously. We have 1 Peter tells us that the devil is like a lion seeking whom to devour, right? Ephesians 6 talks to us about the armor of God to protect us against the wiles of the enemy, the plans, the schemes of the enemy. We also have the flesh. Romans 6 talks to us about the flesh, how we have died with Messiah and we have been resurrected with him. Galatians 5 talks to us about the fruit of the flesh, but also the fruit of the Spirit, the works of the flesh, and the fruit of the Spirit. And we also have the world. So we have Satan, the flesh, and the world. Those are our three enemies. I think the one that we know the least is the world. We do talk about the world, and we know this is the world system. Ephesians says that Satan is the god of this world. And in 1 John, we are told not to love the world. And the word that's used there is agape. Do not love the world sacrificially. Do not make sacrifices for the world. For me, I understood that when my kids were little, and I make conscious efforts to not choose sports over my kids, to not sacrifice my kids for the love of what? What is sport? It means nothing compared to the value of my kids. And do not love the world. But I want to show you a passage to begin with in 1 Corinthians 7. I didn't tell you guys this. 1 Corinthians 7, 29, beginning in 29 to 31. 1 Corinthians 7, 29 to 31. It's a passage that also talks about the world, but it's not very well known. It's not very well known. And I think it's very freeing when we understand what this passage says. And it is important to understand what it says for our spiritual maturity. So 1 Corinthians 7:29 says, "But this I say, brethren, the time has been shortened, so that from now on those who have wives should be as though they had none." Of course, we're in 1 Corinthians 7. Paul is answering questions in 1 Corinthians. And one of the questions is about, should we get married? Should I take a wife? Should I marry my virgin daughter? And things like that. And he's going about answering this. And so towards the end, he puts himself as an example. And he says, it would be better for you not to get married, because the world is it's coming to an end. These things coming to an end, and it's very difficult. There will be a lot of persecution, and it's going to be very difficult for you to have a wife and live that way. But then he says, but if God is leading you to get married, by all means, please do so. And we know all the other apostles had wives. We know Peter had a wife. Paul talks about that, and who traveled with him and all of that, so probably had grown kids. So he is here concluding about this issue of answering regarding marriage, but he's going to take this a little deeper into the world. So in verse 29, he addresses again this issue of marriage. If you have a wife, if you are married, live in such a way as if you are not. What in the world does he mean? Well, I think he means that both of you need to live in such a way that you prioritize the Lord. That you prioritize the Lord. That the other is not a hindrance, that you are not a hindrance to one another in terms of following what God has for you, especially as times get more difficult. Imagine living in Israel right now, right? You may be called back to the army. And it doesn't mean just the guy. It could be the wife. right? Everybody serves. And then the other one stays home with the children. And this can be very difficult. This is a very difficult time in Israel. So it's not the time for someone to be demanding, you are my wife, you are my husband, you need to do these things for me, I'm expecting you to. It's like, no, you need to live in such a way as though you are following God, both prioritizing your relationship with the Lord. So in verse 30, he says, and those who weep as though they did not weep. Those who rejoice as though they did not rejoice. And those who buy as though they did not possess. Okay, he's just like, where are you going with this, Paul? Right? I think he is saying, he's putting marriage, but he's expanding the context. He's talking about society. He's talking about jobs, money, economy, buying things, having businesses, enjoying the things of the world, entertainment, those who rejoice. I think he's expanding these things. If you're lamenting because of a loss, if you're weeping because of a loss, be a little more mature and understand the place of the things that you own, that they are secondary at best. So then in 31, he is going to give us a little more clarity into what he is saying. In 31, he says, and those who use the world as though they did not make full use of it. For the form of this world is passing away. The form of this world is passing away. God so loved the world. The word for world here is the word cosmos. We know this word, right? The cosmos, the universe. And so it speaks of an arrangement. That's what this word means. Of an order, a certain order. When God created things in Genesis 1, we see that he created everything for a certain function, and he set it all in a certain order. That is the cosmos. That is the world. So in that regard, the origin of the world is not a bad thing. But again, Ephesians says that the God of this world is Satan. So we know that through Adam and Eve's sin, they gave up the authority that they had given by God to rule. So much so that when Satan appeared to Yeshua in the wilderness, he said, I have authority over the kingdoms of this world. If you bow down to me, I will give it to you. And I think Yeshua chuckled inside of him and said, little dude, I created you. I created you. Just, please get out of my sight. Okay, I'll play along with you. I'll quote the Shema to you and just go away. So this word then, cosmos, it speaks of the world system, the arrangement of the world, the order in which God placed everything in the world. But this system, this arrangement, this world seems to be going a little crazy these days. More than usual. Now, Scripture shows us another time when the world went pretty crazy. And actually, we read about that last week, Genesis 6. So let's go back to Genesis 6 real quick. And let's read about the flood and what brought about the flood. Because I think we can learn a few things from that time when the world went crazy to understand what is going on with the world today. In which ways is the world going crazy today? So Genesis 6, verse 5. We're not gonna read the entire thing, but we're gonna read a few verses here. So 5 and 6 says, Then the Lord saw the wickedness of man, that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. The words here are just so powerful and so encompassing. Every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Verse 6 says that the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. He was grieved in his heart. Verse 11. Now the earth was corrupt in the sight of God, and the earth was filled with Hamas. Right? By now we understand. This is the word. This word violence here is the word Hamas. If you watch any part of the news and you heard about the United Nations, as I made a reference earlier today, they voted in a big resolution. 154 countries, I think, voted in favor of this. A few countries voted against. Fortunately, the United States was among them. Some abstained, which is the same as voting for it, pretty much. In favor of, again, condemning Israel and calling for Israel's ceasefire. Really. I don't think I need to explain to you how wrong that is. But they are living up to their mission statement. Companies and organizations have a mission statement. They say what they think they are about. That is called an aspirational statement or an aspirational vision. But then when you get to work inside, you realize they really are not about what they say they are about. This is a very dysfunctional place. So they would like to be like this, but in reality, the reality is different. Well, don't pay attention to what the United Nations say that they are about. Pay attention to what they do. That's what's going to tell you. That is the actual vision, not the aspirational vision, right? So I like to propose that we rename them for what they really are. They are the nations united against Israel. That's what they are. The nations united against Israel. Amazing. Amazing. Incited, yes. Psalm 2. That's the key verse, the key passage there. But we're not going to go there. So the earth was corrupt. I want to talk about this corruption because I think that's exactly what's happening in the world today. That's what happened back then. The world was corrupt. Spoiled. Kind of like when you put the food back in the fridge and forget it for, 6 months. And you go back and, that's not good. I have a bad habit. Sometimes because I'm kind of lazy around the kitchen, so sometimes I grab things real quick and I put it back in the oven. I forget it for 3 days. And then my wife wants to cook, and she opens the oven. Yeah, it's bad. It can be really bad. They're corrupt. So this isn't the type of corruption like when people steal money, from the government, or it's not that type of corruption. It's not corrupt politicians, but this is moral corruption, moral going spoiled as a human being. That everything that you are supposed to be as a human being, as humanity, as the nations, we're going rotten and spoiled and corrupt. That's really what's happening here. That's what happened then, and that's what's happening here. And we know the story. God said, we're going to put an end to this. We're going to restart again, reboot this thing. and hopefully it goes better, but it went right back, right? We read Genesis 11, and it went right back. All the nations, they gathered together. They wanted to build a name for themselves. They wanted to be their own God, and they did not want to spread out as they knew God wanted them to do. And God had to come down, confuse their languages in order to force them to spread out and be separate, so they wouldn't be able to, and confuse their languages so they wouldn't be able to fulfill what they wanted to do, to build a name for themselves, shut God out of their life as a society, as the whole world together. And so they went right back to that kind of corruption. Again, similar to what we see today. But I want us to take a closer look at chapter 10 to understand what this is all about, what actually happened, what is the world arrangement that God established, that He created things to organize this world in order to be, and how this intent and purpose is going corrupt. So come with me to Genesis 10. We're going to begin reading in verse 2. I'm going to read most of this chapter here. Verse 2 says, the sons of Japheth, this is one of the sons of Noah. The sons of Japheth were Gomer and Magog, and we're not going to go into Gog and Magog and the words and what does this mean and all this stuff. So we did that at some point. You may want to search that online, but maybe we'll go back to this. We're not. So the sons of Japheth were Gomer and Magog and Madai and Javan and Tubal and Meshech and Tiras. The sons of Gomer were Ashkenaz. This is not the Ashkenazi Jews, no. Riphat and Togarma. The sons of Javan were Elisha and Tarshish and Kittim and Dodanim. Let me stop here, because Javan here, when you search it in the word in Hebrew, you will see that kind of halfway through the Tanakh, it translates it differently. It translates it as Greece. So here we have Greece, we have Tarshish, the place to where Jonah fled. Some people say that was Spain. You have Kittim, which is Cyprus. You will see that word also translated as Cyprus in the Tanakh. And Dodanim. And then look at verse 5. It says, from these, the coastlands of the nations. So this is a group of nations, mostly Europe, mostly in Europe. From these, the coastlands of the nations were separated into their lands, so they get their language, their ethnicity, their land, and it says everyone according to his language, according to their families, into their nations. So that's from the first son of Noah. Then in verse 6, we have another son of Noah. They're not being listed chronologically here. The text is reserving Shem for last. Because from him is going to be the line of the descendant, the seed of the woman. Genesis 3. As opposed to the seed of the serpent. The seed of the serpent is not other little serpents. No, these are men. See, the seed of the serpent was Cain. And the seed of the woman was Abel. But because Cain killed Abel, then God provided Seth. And he became the seed of the woman. And Abel and all of the descendants that come from Abel, that was the line of the seed of the serpent. And we see this conflict all throughout Genesis. We see it in Abraham and Lot. We see it in Ishmael and Isaac, Jacob and Esau. We see this one who is the seed of the serpent, who rejects the promises of God, who is not the chosen line, who will not inherit the land. But you see the seed of the woman who embraces faith in God, who receives the promises, and who eventually becomes the line of the Messiah. So in verse 6, we see Ham. We know what happened with Ham. Ham is the son of Noah, who had something weird happening there with Noah's nakedness, right? People say it was probably this or it was probably that. But what's important is the result of it. That Noah cursed the youngest son of Ham. Now, the sons of Ham are extremely important in Scripture. The youngest son of Ham was who? Canaan. Canaan. The Canaanites. They are the ones who had this curse upon them. And you may say, that is so unfair. I mean, Canaan was probably a beautiful little boy, and, how God puts this upon him. That's not how things work. Number one, what's the sin of Ham, of a sexual nature, is transmitted. I don't mean in any kind of magical way or genetic way. I think there was something wrong with this man, and this little boy picked it up, and it was something wrong of a sexual nature. And he continued with it, and the fruit that we see from it goes all the way into Sodom and Gomorrah. And so what was in kernel form that God saw in this family developed into what we know as Sodom and Gomorrah. And we see the action of God justified. We can read here the sons of Ham in verse 6. The sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Pud, and Canaan. Who is Mizraim? Egypt. And Canaan, the land of Canaan. All the Canaanites. They're going to be named here, all of them. Verse 15. Let's jump to verse 15. Canaan became the father of Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusites, and the Amorites, and the Girgashites, and the Hivites, and the Archite, and the Sinites. And we know these are all the Canaanites that God then told Israel, you need to dispossess them, and you need to destroy them. Just like Sodom and Gomorrah. It amazes me that people have a problem with, well, Israel committed genocide. Okay. Have you read chapter 6? In which God killed 99.99% of the whole world? What are you going to say about that then? Did God commit genocide? So, why do you have a problem with Israel? Because Israel didn't decide, hey, I have a plan, I have an idea. How about we kill all these people? That's not how it happened. God told Israel, you've got to do this. If you don't, you'll be in trouble with me. I am entrusting you to do this. Nobody came up with this. This is not a human idea. This is God, the sovereign God, who is the creator of every human being, saying, you are going to die because of your sin. Either you will die this way, or you will die another way, or you will die this way, or I can decide when you are going to die. And I can take all of y'all's life in the flood, or I can have a human instrument take care of your life, It's all God. We all belong to God. We all are going to die because of our sin. And that's the way God decided that the Canaanites were going to go. Anyway, so I'm deviating a little bit there. What I want you to see is that Israel ends up in Egypt. And Egypt is a son of Ham. Israel is oppressed by the son of Ham. And they will later have to deal with another son of Ham, Canaan, the Canaanite. And they will later have to deal with another son of Ham, Canaan, the Canaanite. Are you, little Joey? You know, are you like the rabbi of Israel now? Are you the Sephardic rabbi, you know, of who are you to say such a thing? This is the key to understand the Torah. I mean, come on. Well, how about I tell it to you, and then you tell me if I'm wrong, okay? See, what's happening here from chapter 10 is that the people who was cursed has possession of the land. But the people who are blessed are exiled from the land. That is wrong. And in the entirety of the Torah, the aim is to correct this wrong. That the people who are cursed should not have possession of the land. Cain was expelled from the land, wasn't he? All of the inhabitants of the land in chapter 6 were exiled from the land. They were killed. Lot, exiled from the land. Abraham, possessor of the land, at least the promise of the land. Ishmael, exiled from the land. Isaac, promised the land. Esau, exiled from the land. Jacob, promise of the land. The one who is blessed in Genesis has possession of the land or has the promise that the land, that God is giving them the land, except for one, Canaan. What in the world is happening here? This is wrong. Canaan should not have possession of the land. He's not the blessed seed. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and their descendants should have possession of the land. They are the blessed seed. All of the ones who were blessed, they have possession of the land, except Abraham and his descendants. So for the rest of the Torah, this is the problem that we're going to solve. And Israel comes to the edge of the land in Numbers 13 and 14, and they say, no, we're afraid of the giants. The giants are Canaanites. I ordered you to kill them. I am going ahead of you. And I'm the one that's going to kill them. I'm strengthening you. Don't be afraid of them. Okay, so got to wait 40 years. We come back, the book of Numbers, the book of Deuteronomy. We are again at the edge of the land. This movie has to come to a resolution. We got to have the good guys getting the land and the bad guys being kicked out of the land. And the Torah ends, and it still doesn't happen. What are you doing, God? What kind of book are you writing? The best there ever was. Because season 1 of Scripture ends, and you don't have the resolution. The Torah, season 1 ends, and the good guys are still not possessing the land. And the bad guys are still in the land. You have to wait until season 2. Season 2 is called the prophets, the Nevi'im. Joshua is the beginning of the prophets. That is where the Torah comes to a resolution. You have to watch season 2. Why did God do it that way? So we understand that the Nevi'im are all about the same thing as the Torah. The Torah is all about, will Israel have faith to possess the land? And the Nevi'im are all about, will Israel have faith to continue to have possession of the land and not be exiled? And we know how that's going to end. They will not have faith, and they will be exiled from the land. But they will come back. And the story goes on. We don't have time because we're doing something different today. But this is the key to understand the Torah. This is what's happening in the Torah. The commandments are to tell Israel, you got to do this to show your faith so that you can possess the land. That's how the commandments work. So, Genesis 10 is extremely important, not only for Genesis, but for the whole of the Torah. That's where we understand the problem that the Torah is addressing here. We got to kick the bad guys out of the land and get the good guys into the land. But notice a huge change that takes place in Genesis 10 and 11. That God decided, I'm not going to destroy all of them. I'm going to confuse their languages, and I'm going to divide them into nations. Up to this point, the whole earth was one language, one people. From now on, and it will never change again, God will operate under the arrangement, the cosmos, the world system of nations. God is going to work in nations. But he is going to say, I'm going to create one for me. And to that, you need to understand how holiness works. Because that's the key here. When God says, this is going to be my people, whatever is his means that he brings it closer to him. He brings Israel near to him. That is Levitical code, Levitical language for holiness. Holiness is transmitted by nearness. When God brings you near to him, he sanctifies you. He infuses you with life, with holiness. So to bring Israel, to create a nation for himself, this is the first time I ever hear him cry. He is most amazing boy. So for God to create this nation for himself means it is holy. And he not only created a nation, but he took a piece of land as his inheritance. Out of all the lands of the nation, he took one piece of real estate and he said, that one is mine, which means, again, it is holy. I'm drawing the land of Israel near to me. It's infused with holiness. When you treat something that is holy in a way that isn't holy, you get in trouble. You get in trouble. Remember the guy? They're carrying the Ark of the Covenant, bringing it back to Israel. They're bringing it the wrong way. The ark is teetering. It's going to fall. The guy says, I'm going to do a good deed for you, God. I'm going to put my hand. It's like, I wish you didn't do that. I believe that guy is in heaven. I don't think he lost his salvation, but he's surely lost his life on this earth. You can't treat something that is holy in a way that isn't. There will be consequences for that. You treat the people that God has created for himself in a way that isn't holy, not going to go well for you. You treat the land that God has brought near to himself as if it wasn't holy. You want to take it for yourself, not going to go well for you. You may seem to have some success for a little while, but the God of vengeance will come after you, and it will not go well for you. That's what we see in Genesis 10. God has decided, I'm going to operate in nations, and I'm going to create one for me. I'm going to give them all their land, but the land that I've chose for myself, I'm going to give it to this nation. And that brings us back to what in the world is happening today. The corruption that we see in the world today consists in upending, in undermining this arrangement that God has set up. He has given nations their own lands, and he has given Israel its own land, his land. And the world is coming up against God and saying, not so. Not going to happen. We will kill them and we will take their land. Try. Try. Okay, so we could stop here, and I just told you what's happening in the world. Or we can continue, and I tell you why and how. Yes? Okay, I have one vote. Propose and second. Seconded. All right, so let me tell you how this is happening. How is this happening? Well, this has been in the making, believe it or not, for a whole 1,000 years. In 1088, the University of Bologna in Italy was founded. In 1096, the University of Oxford was founded. In 1150, the University of Paris was founded. And in 1209, the University of Cambridge was founded. This is the beginning of what is of a different way of education and learning. Up to this point, education took place in the churches, primarily only the Catholic Church. That was your only option up to that point. And it's going to be for 500 more years, your only option, Catholic Church. But now, even though education continues to be based on religion and the Catholic Church, it's more, I probably should use the word scholarly. So it becomes now the pursuit of knowledge, wherever it may lead. And so they begin to go back to the classics, to the Greek and Latin classics, and they begin to read philosophy and study all this stuff. And this is going to lead to the Renaissance. The Renaissance in the 1400s takes this, and it's the maturity of all these years of studying the knowledge of the world and knowledge of man. It comes to this time of the Renaissance in the 1400s. And this is joined with the Reformation in the 1500s. And all of this together, the creation of the university, which is called this scholasticism, you hear the word scholar, education, the Renaissance and the Reformation all comes to fruition, and their fruit is throw off the shackles of the authority of the church and the authority of tradition. And this is replaced with man. Man is now the center, the decider of knowledge. And this is done through the scientific method. I need to smell it, I need to see it, I need to measure it, I need to taste it. If you can't do any of this, if you can't reproduce it in the lab, it doesn't exist. So, prove to me the resurrection of Messiah. It's a one-time event. Then I can't accept it. It's not scientific fact because I can't reproduce it in the lab. Whatever is real is what I can see and I can measure. So man becomes the center rather than God. Science becomes the authority rather than tradition. And this is going to lead to what is called the Enlightenment, which is going to lead to modernism. Now, let me read to you what the Enlightenment is. This is going to sound very familiar. Here's a quote. The Enlightenment included a range of ideas centered on the value of human happiness, the pursuit of knowledge obtained by means of reason, and the evidence of the senses, scientific method, right? I need to see it, taste it, measure it, touch it. And ideals such as natural law, liberty, progress, tolerance, fraternity, constitutional government, and separation of church and state. I have one word or one phrase that is going to sum this all up. All of these ideals of the Enlightenment. The United States of America. Did you know that America was founded upon the ideals of the Enlightenment? It's a well-known fact. And we're proud of it. The problem with this is that it threw off the authority of God, the authority of Scripture, and it placed it on man. The pursuit of happiness, the scientific method, all of these things are based on man. And it will lead again and again, wave after wave, it will lead to liberal theology, among other things. The ideas of the Enlightenment undermined the authority of the monarchy. We're pretty proud of that. And the Catholic Church, and paved the way for the political revolutions of the 18th and the 19th centuries, meaning the American Revolution and the French Revolution, based on the Enlightenment. With the ideals of the Enlightenment, with these ideas, and the Industrial Revolution, the world became completely different. The modern world was born. That is modernity. You have the modern world. The ideals of democracy and liberty and freedom, beautiful things, joined with the technological advances of, now we have the train, now we have the engines, and we can automate processes and create, trust in mass production of things that affects the economy, and capitalism is born. All of these things are going to have one problem, is that you can't stop it. And it will continue and continue and continue and develop into an exploitation of one another for the sake of economy, for the sake of power, for the sake of domination. And this happened indeed. And it led us all the way to World War I, World War II, and the Holocaust. That was the failure, the utter failure of modernity. That's what brought us. And so, in the light of this, and in the leading up to this, another movement was born to counteract the bad fruit of modernity. And it is called postmodernity, postmodernism. Let me tell you what postmodernism is, what it's all about. This is, again, it's going to sound very familiar. Number one, postmodernism is about the rejection of a grand narrative, a narrative that encompasses everything. It is against a grand narrative. What is the primary grand narrative that we know, especially in the West? That God created everything, that He is the source of ultimate authority, and therefore there is objective truth, and we're all accountable to Him for how we live morally in society. Postmodernism says, not so. Every person has their own truth. There's no such thing as one account that includes everything. We are against that. Every person has their own opinion, and it's just as valid as the next person. There's no such thing as a grand narrative. That leads to relativism, of course. Truth is relative. It's your truth. In your culture, in your experience, it's just as valid. Also, pluralism is the same thing. But it leads to a couple of things that we also know: identity and marginalization. You can choose any identity that you want, and nobody has a right to tell you that you're wrong. There is no meta-narrative that says that some God created only two identities. Nope. If you can dream it, it is true. But also, those who have chosen these things are marginalized and oppressed. And we need to hear their voices. They have a right to exist. They have their own truth, and we need to respect their truth and embrace them. Sound familiar? Are you beginning to see what's happening to our world? The corruption of this world. So, how can you tell that someone is a postmodernist? How can you tell when you encounter, when you read something that is postmodern? What do postmodernists do? How can you identify them? Well, the primary practice of a postmodernist is deconstruction. Have you heard that word? Deconstruction. That's what they do. But what does that mean? Some of you haven't heard that. Yeah, it has to do with critiquing, but it goes way beyond that. You become an activist to destroy it. So deconstruction isn't just theoretical, it's political, it affects every area of life. And here's the reason. Deconstruction seeks to reveal the hidden, oppressive, and racist motivation behind the ideas of modernity. Remember, postmodernism is reacting to modernism. Modernism is bad. But what is modernism again? Well, these are the ideas of innovation, See, innovation is racist. Having your own business and being successful is oppressive. They're deconstructing all of this. They are destroying the foundations of this because they're coming against the ultimate authority. Tradition of any kind, of any sort, is suspect. It's racist and it's oppressive. Reason. Did you know that logic is also seen as, well, that's white culture. Being logical and arguing in logical ways, that's oppressive. Because it believes in a meta-narrative that there is an explanation for everything and you cannot have your own truth. That's oppressive. That's racist. All of these things, this method, this practice of deconstruction affect capitalism. You have to deconstruct capitalism because it's racist and it's oppressive. Government. So they're all protecting democracy. They are destroying democracy. That's what they're doing. Social authority, societal authority, otherwise known as defund the police. That is deconstruction. You're an activist. You're not just writing. This isn't literary dreams. You're not smoking a pipe, sitting at Starbucks and drinking lattes. No. You're an activist. You're going to go out and burn things. Defund the police. What happened in Afghanistan? What's the biggest police in the world? The U.S. military. What the current administration is doing is deconstructing America from within. So, defund the police became defund the U.S. military. So take billions and billions of dollars in military equipment and just leave it. Just leave it. See, this is reparations. Because the U.S. has suppressed the world for years. It's time that the money, that the power the U.S. has be redistributed to the world. So don't you ever believe that the reason they did that is because they're cowards, they're incompetent. All of this is done intentionally. It is intentional. They are deconstructing America by giving away our wealth. How many billions for Ukraine? It doesn't matter. It's not about Ukraine. We don't love Ukraine. They don't love Ukraine. They can't care less about them. It's all about, another opportunity to give away the wealth, to deconstruct America, to undermine the government, to undermine democracy, all in the name of saving democracy. They are saving democracy in Ukraine. Sure. This has to do with social justice. Social justice is anything but. There's no justice. It is the opposite. It is taking the cause of who they perceive to be oppressed and come against the oppressor, who they perceive to be the oppressor, and turn the whole thing upside down. It doesn't matter that you are going into stores and ransacking everything and stealing thousands of dollars. It doesn't matter because you are marginalized. You who are doing this, you've been oppressed. And those who own these things, they had it coming. They have been oppressing people for generations. So, yeah, social justice. Colonialism, you're hearing this word now, especially against Israel. Colonialism. Colonialism used to be when England, remember how England, the English empire, the empire on which the sun never sets, because they had colonized from all the way from India all the way to the Caribbean. Hundreds, dozens of nations. When did the United States do that? It's the only power in history that never colonized anyone. Oh, but you did it through your culture, through your economic power. You went into countries like the country I come from, Venezuela, and you took all their oil. You stole it from them. Really? I was born there. I know what happened there. I know the corruption that happened from within. I know the laziness to not own the processes and step up to your potential and develop a nation that could use the resources that you were blessed with. No. Pay somebody, let them do it. We'll get a lot of money, and we just party and drink. I just told you what Venezuela is all about. And of course, morality. We have to undermine the postmodernists. They have to undermine this idea that there is a morality dictated to everyone and that we are going to be accountable to one supreme being. They hate that with a passion. They know where that comes from. They know it comes from the Bible. They know it comes from Christianity. And now they realize, wait a minute, all of this stuff actually comes from Israel. So guess who the granddaddy of all the oppressors is throughout all history? The Jews. So anti-Semitism, that is a good thing, actually. So let it run. You ever seen anybody arrested for all these demonstrations in support of a terrorist organization? Why? Because they believe in it. You have to deconstruct the powers that hold authority. In Israel, they just realized this. They are the number one. They are the source of the God of Christianity, the book of Christianity, all of this. So, yeah, actually, Israel is the number one enemy of the world, according to postmodernism. I got a lot more, but we need to go eat. Why do postmodernists embrace communism and socialism? If indeed communism and socialism want to impose a meta-narrative, ultimately, when communism wins, postmodernism loses, because they're going to impose a strong authority, much stronger than capitalism and democracy. So why would a postmodernist adopt socialism and communism? Because they believe in the entry-level promise of socialism and communism is we have to dethrone capitalism and democracy. So the postmodernist says, I'm all about that. Let's do it. The enemy of, what do you say? However you say that, right? The enemies of my friend, I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say. But it doesn't make sense that they would support such a thing. So postmodernists support Hamas. Why on earth? Lesbians for Palestine. You wouldn't last an hour. You wouldn't last an hour. Why? Okay. The postmodernist view of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, they view it as an extension of historical colonialism, and you're hearing that in the news now. So the postmodernists, they express solidarity with the Palestinians who are an oppressed and displaced people group. They have to side with them because they are the oppressed, and they are all for the oppressed, the marginalized, and against the colonial powers. Postmodernists perceive the Israeli government as having more economic and military power, leading them to support the less powerful party. Israel is the oppressor. So they all vote against Israel in the United Nations. They're all postmodernists. Postmodernists care for the human rights, social justice, and the well-being of marginalized or oppressed communities, but never for the human rights, the social justice, and the well-being of those that they consider oppressors. You can behead children as long as they're Israeli children, Jewish children. It's all fair game. But they touch one of them, and the United Nations is condemning. Ceasefire. Because they're looking after the rights and the social justice and the human well-being of the oppressed, what they consider the oppressed. Postmodernists use incomplete historical, cultural, and socio-political facts, half-truths. They've owned the land. They lived there for 100 years. I have a title deed to the piece of land the Israeli took it from me. Well, they use this to create a reality that favors what they consider to be the oppressed. You see, the media is complicit in this because the media is also postmodernist. And so the media blurs the lines between reality and their presentation of the truth. This is what is called hyper-reality, which is the distortion of reality in order to create a favorable narrative and turn it into reality. They don't care that they're lying. They don't care that it's illogical. The end justifies the means. What are we to do? We need to know and understand the philosophies that are corrupting this world. We need to understand these things. We need to understand that this is a rebellion against the authority of God and His Word, because they establish an accountability relationship to objective truth and moral values. They can't have that. We need to not be deceived by the world, by what we hear, by their arguments, by their appeal to emotions. Do you know the term Hollywood? You know what Hollywood is? It's a play on Hollywood and Palestinian. It's Palestinian Hollywood. and you see, 5 guys carrying a dead person on a stretcher, that was bombed by the Israelis, and they come, but then they hear an actual Israeli airplane coming, and they put the corpse down, and they all run, and then the guy that's on the stretcher, he gets up and runs. The newest one was a bunch of bodies, body bags of what Israel has done. And then the camera is going, and then it pauses, stops on one guy, and the guy starts moving, and he's scratching his nose or something. I don't know. It's supposed to be a corpse in a body bag. That's Hollywood. That's what the media does. We cannot fall for that. Do not cave to their pressure to believe their reality. Arm yourself with facts, but know that they will not follow your logic. You will not be able to convince them with logical arguments. This is for you, for your own education. Although the Israeli government in certain areas is liberal and even postmodernist, we never waver on our support of the Israeli people and their right to exist and thrive. Here at home, I'm going to say this 3 times. Vote. Vote, vote, vote. Vote your biblical values. Forget the personalities. Forget the tweets. Vote your biblical values. And I'm going to end with this. 1 Corinthians 16. 1 Corinthians 16:13. This is a very awkward verse. 1 Corinthians 16:13. It's a very awkward verse. You'll see it in a moment. But it's so appropriate. So appropriate. It says, be on the alert, stand firm in the faith, act like men. And all you ladies are like, what the heck is that? Act like men. Be strong. Act like men. You know what's amazing? This little phrase, act like men, is one word in the Greek. And when I looked it up in the dictionary, the Greek dictionary, the scholarly, the best one, it gave a reference in the Old Testament, in the Tanakh. And when I clicked on the verse, it was something in Samuel. And it says, chasak, venid chasek. I was shocked. I was shocked. You know what that means? That is the word that the Lord told Moses to tell Joshua. Be strong. Be strong and courageous. Act courageously. I would translate it that way. Act courageously. Act courageously.